bill will be presented to the Congress for action next year. It will include an across-the-board, top-to-bottom cut in both corporate and personal income taxes.
Guess what? If you elect me, you're not going to have your taxes are going to be raised, not cut.
Corporate tax rates must also be cut to increase incentives and the availability of investment capital.
I would raise the corporate tax. I would raise billions of dollars, raise the corporate tax rate from 20 to 28%.
For all these reasons, next year's tax bill should reduce personal as well as corporate income taxes for those in the lower brackets who are certain to spend their additional take-home pay, and for those in the middle and upper brackets who can thereby be encouraged to undertake additional efforts and enabled to invest more capital.
That's why I'm going to double the capital gains rate to 40%.
So every single solitary person, their capital gains are going to be treated like real income. They're going to pay 40% of their capital gains on their capital gains tax.
To achieve these greater gains, one step above all is essential. The enactment this year of a substantial reduction and revision in federal income taxes.
Well, guess what? First thing I do is going to repeal this Trump tax cut. Oh, not a joke.
All right, now I know two different time periods. I know the rates during JFK's time were a lot higher than they are now, and that the corporate rate, that north of 50%, you have someone else who's looking at changing that to 28%. JFK's proposal would bring it down to 47% of the time. It would slowly slide through Republican Democratic administrations from there. But the lower levels or not, it's a different party espousing a whole different set of vibes here. What do you think?
It really is just a remarkable demonstration of the shift, Neil. You can hear in the 60s rhetoric the notion that the most liberal thing you could think of doing was doing some fiscal fine-tuning of the private sector as people's route to prosperity. And what you hear now is that all prosperity runs through the government, and the idea that it's a good idea to raise taxes when we're in the middle of the biggest downdraft we've had since the Great Depression is just mind-boggling. And it represents the departure of the Democratic Party from any interest in reliance on the private sector, any belief in the power of private markets, and certainly one of the most troubling developments that I see on the landscape today.
You know, when you talk to the Biden folks or even prominent Democrats elsewhere today, they say we're nowhere near the levels that even JFK was able to achieve, sadly, after his death with those lower rates. So these levels are, even with the increases that Biden plans, much, much lower than back then. So do not say that the JFK moderating approach on taxes is dead. What do you say?
I say that his approach is dead. What you saw was in that clip was a belief that the quality of tax policy mattered as much as the level of taxes. There were going to be across-the-board cuts, even-handed cuts that treated things neutrally. You don't hear anything like that in the discussion of tax policy among Democrats now. It is, who can we tax? Who can we use the tax system to discriminate against and punish? No respect for the economic incentives that produces. And so there's not going to be a reliance on capital accumulation, productivity growth, and higher wages to get wealth. There's going to be flat-out redistribution, and that's the agenda at the moment.
This could be, Melissa, one of the biggest issues, if you think about it, in the 2020 election, the U.S. relationship with China. But it barely came up this week during the Democratic National Convention. Now, the Trump campaign may see that as an opening, try to take further ownership of the issue at the Republican convention next week. We're going to talk about that in some detail in just a moment. First, a live report from Rich Edson at the State Department. Hey, Rich.
Hey, good afternoon, Connell. And, the president is really pointing this out, and he says that the former vice president and Democrats were almost avoiding their record on China in their week-long convention. The president also sees this as an opportunity and continues repeating his attacks on Vice President Joe Biden and China.
China was never mentioned in any way, shape, or form. China will own our country if he gets elected. They will own our country. And we're not going to let that happen. And you've seen the intelligence reports. China very much wants Joe Biden to win.
After the spread of the coronavirus, the Trump administration has led an aggressive foreign policy towards China, announcing sanctions on Chinese government officials for mass human rights abuses, shutting the Chinese consulate in Houston, forcing TikTok to divest in the U.S., sell to another company, and the international campaign against Chinese tech company Huawei. Biden says President Trump is cozying up to dictators. Democrats point to accusations from former National Security Advisor John Bolton that Trump told Chinese President Xi Jinping last year to continue building concentration camps in China's mass oppression of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Biden says the Trump administration has eroded American credibility and influence around the world, making it more difficult to counter China. And in the spring, he wrote, the United States does not need to get tough with China. The most effective way to meet that challenge is to build a united front of U.S. allies. Now, up next is the Republican convention. That is next week, when they have an opportunity to talk about China if they so desire. Back to you.
We'll see. Probably hear more than we did this week. Rich, thank you. Steve Forbes is with us, the Forbes media chairman. What do you think? Is there an opening for President Trump that the Democrats have left on China? And if so, how does he exploit that or take advantage of it next week?
The opening is huge. You could drive an old big dump truck through that one. That and one of the riots in the cities domestically. And in terms of China, Biden was on tape several years ago saying, what's the big deal? We're cozy with China. He dismissed the thing. You're going to see that in campaign ads. I think it's running already. And the key thing is, what do we do about China? Trump, whether you like it or not, has taken effective steps on a number of fronts. And I think more steps are going to be taken, especially in the South China Sea and other areas where China's been very aggressive militarily. And this gets to the U.S. military buildup. The focus here has been on defunding the police. What about the proposals to defund the military at a time when we need a stronger military than any time since the Cold War, especially with the Navy in the South China Sea and elsewhere?
When it comes to China, and you mentioned some of the issues, Steve, and Rich did a good job. He ran through a lot of them, whether it's, it could be TikTok, it could be trade, could be human rights, you name it. It's out there. So should the president hone in on one or two of those, or does he go in the direction of talking about the virus and how he thinks the Chinese are to blame for the virus, and that, his handling of that could be a weak point politically for him? So does he try to use the shifting of the blame next week to his advantage?
Well, when they bring up the virus, he can point out, as he's done in the past, what he did in January, and the Democrats are silent or actively opposed to it. But I think what he can really have fun with in terms of politics is, where does Joe Biden stand on the South China Sea? Where does he stand on TikTok? Where does he stand on Huawei? Put some real things on the table. Where has Trump gone wrong with dealing with China? And that way you pinpoint him. What are the specifics? One of the things about the Democratic convention this week, was how they didn't have a lot of specifics. They had a couple of things, but that was it. And people are going to want to know, what exactly are you going to do? And what is Biden going to do in terms of presenting a united front, in terms of bringing in closer relationships, as we're already establishing with countries like India, Vietnam, and elsewhere? They used to say, before the vegans try to educate us, where's the beef? Where's the beef on this?
Yeah, that's exactly what they used to say. It wasn't just China this week, Steve. The Democrats didn't really talk that much about foreign policy at all. I mean, they had people like John Kerry, I guess, who could have done it, the former Secretary of State, Biden himself, experienced in foreign policy, but they didn't really focus on that. I would assume because they think other issues are more beneficial to them, or they can win without it. But what did you make of that?
Well, they always talk about how our relationships with our allies are frayed. But again, what specifically do they have in mind? John Kerry brought up the deal architected the deal with Iran on nuclear weapons. We know what a sham that was. And so again, Trump can say to Biden, you gave Iran $150 billion. Most of it went to terrorism and stirring up trouble in the Middle East, spilling a lot of blood. What exactly are you going to do about that? And in terms of inspectors, one of the things that agreement did not provide was allowing spot inspections anytime, anywhere in Iran. So you can hone in on the specific flaws of that and say to Joe Biden, you were there, why didn't you fix that? And so again, those are issues. People know national security is important. And on the Russian front, they say, oh, he's cozy with Putin. But Trump can point out in terms of weapons to Ukraine. The Trump administration did far more than the Barack Obama Biden administration, and other issues. So again, get the specifics. What are you going to do differently? Don't just say, oh, we'll have a united front and everything will be cozy rosy. No, sir, not in this world. And I think Trump can say, when it comes to getting real things done with Russia, we've done more than that in previous administration. And remember, until the election, was all talk of reset with Russia. We're going to be friends with Russia.
Right.
We're going to have a new relationship with Russia. Yeah, we had a new one, all right, but not what they outlined 8 years before.
Well, we'll see what happens next week. I think, especially with China, the Trump administration or the president himself probably thinks there are some openings there on a number of different fronts. So we'll see how much it comes up next week. Steve, thanks. Have a great weekend. Steve Forbes.